Hello, welcome back to the channel. I'm Zach Markowski, and today I'll be covering the introduction to Ralph Waldo Emerson's Self-Reliance. Now, the essay begins with a poem, but it's mostly the first paragraph that I wanted to focus on today, as well as a call and echo that was repeated later in history in Nietzsche's work, which is to say Schopenhauer's Educator. So, Emerson begins this with the epilogue to Beaumont and Fletcher's Honest Man's Fortune, which follows: Man is his own star, and the soul that can render an honest and a perfect man. Commands all light, all influence, all fate. Nothing to him falls early or too late. Our acts, our angels are, or good or ill, are fatal shadows that walk by us still. Cast the bantling on the rock, suckle him with the she-wolf's teat, wintered with the hawk and fox, power and speed by hands and feet. And Emerson begins the essay, he just comes out the gate swinging. I read the other day some verses written by an eminent painter which were original and not conventional. So he's saying, I read some words from an artist that were original and not a repetition of what people already say. The soul always hears an admonition in such lines. So the soul always hears a reprimand in such lines, right? It always hears a because what is it telling you? Let the subject be what it may. The sentiment they instills is of more value than any thought they may contain. I know there's a lot of logocentric people and philosophers out there still. You guys really are obsessed with language and you think language is reality. And maybe it is, but it's not. So anyway, the idea that the projection is reality, one's perception is reality versus degrees of revolution or degrees of resolution, context, angles, positions in place and time, meaning, hey, if you were anyone else in the world, you would be saying what they say too. You would think like them too. You would speak like their type. If you were an artist, you'd be an artist. If you were a worker, you'd be a worker, so on and so forth. And you'd have your justifications for all that, right? Because what else are you justifying? Someone else's position? No. So it goes on. The sentiment they instill is of more value than any thought they may contain. To believe our own thought, to believe that what is true for you in your own private heart is true for all men, that is genius, right? He's speaking of observing patterns in reality. But I'll offer it's also insanity when your projections are generally wrong for 2,500 years and counting, and for another 2,500 years and counting. And it's not that things are right or wrong, it's the spirit of the right and wrong and the consequences thereof. And basically, the idea is one of a question of values. Do human beings live by their values? Emerson's saying no, they're slaves. Speak your latent conviction, and it shall be the universal sense, for the inmost in due times becomes the outmost. And again, this is Neo-Platonian, right? It's kind of the same old ideals, right? We don't just have ideas, we have ideas about ideas. Oh, great. Well, this will actually make things clearer, right? This will make things easier. The more knowledge and information, the more ideals, the easier things are to understand, right? No, back to what I was talking about with Gurdjieff the other day, that anytime a group of people gather and one person says one word, you have as many different interpretations as people. Never mind that no single man puts the same thing in his words as another. This is the whole thing that gives the illusion of the form, that I can say tree, you can say tree, but in our minds we see very different trees. I see the anchorite tree. Someone else sees a fig tree. Like the hungry man sees a fig tree. The dumb man sees a dead tree. Like on and on you go. So from inmost in due time becomes the outmost, and our first thought is rendered to us back by the trumpets of the last judgment. Familiar is the voice of the mind into each. The highest merit we ascribe to Moses, Plato, and Milton, that they said it not books and traditions, and spoke not what men, but what they thought, right? The understanding that you could trust your own genius to say, hey, maybe I can discern what is or isn't real here. A man should learn to detect and watch the gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, right? Like that Socratic daemon, right? Before, when the early human consciousness was born in cosmopolitan civilization, was just barely beginning to recognize its own voice enough to write it down as a distinct entity, right? Rather than drones of a singular culture and mind who don't really have much beyond a loose religion to kind of contain these hostile and strange and cooperative forces. So going on, a man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmament of bards and sages, meaning why seek entertainment outside yourself? Yet he dismisses without notice his thought, right? Or another idea is create, don't consume. Yet he dismisses without notice his own thought because it is his, right? You ignore yourself and pick up what other people offer. You don't listen within, you listen without. You don't look within, you look without. You defer your responsibility. You defer your judgment. You defer before long your whole body, mind, and soul. Anyway, so great works of art have no more affecting lesson for us than this. They teach us to abide by our spontaneous impression with good-humored inflexibility than most when the whole cry of voices is on the other side. Right, they're all afraid of death. Everything is just a stopgap, and people mistake fiction and fantasy for reality. Else tomorrow a stranger will say with masterly good sense precisely what we have thought and felt all the time, and we shall be forced to take with shame our own opinion from another. So he's basically saying, man, it's like man lives in a slave-like state, just asking for permission. And until he sees what he suspects confirmed in the world by a genius, he's just in the dark. Until an authority grants him being, right? You see his dilemma, you see his dependence, you see his slavery. And you see why Emerson focuses on this idea that he heard the original words of an artist and, they weren't conventional, and why people feel shamed. I also said it yesterday that there's a reason why authenticity is embarrassing to modern people, because when you generally live in amidst a fake, cynical culture whose whole purpose is a production and people just looking for ever better paymasters, it's authenticity almost has no place, and it becomes embarrassing, and then you just don't know what to do with it. Has no place on the market, kind of why I covered flies in the marketplace, right? But from here, I wanted you to hear the echo now. There was the call to the ages, let's say. And I wanted you to hear it echoed in the beginning of Nietzsche's Untimely Meditations, Schopenhauer's Educator. This is the first part of the essay. A traveler who had been to many countries, peoples, and several of the earth's continents was asked what attribute he had found in men everywhere. He said, "They have a propensity for laziness." To others, it seems that he should have said, "They are all fearful. They hide themselves behind customs and opinions," right? Other like values that were generated outside of them. In his heart, every man knows quite well that, being unique, he will be in the world only once, and that there will be no second chance for this oneness to coalesce from the strangely variegated assortment that he is. He knows it, but hides it like a bad conscience. Why? Well, lots of reasons. First off, many men, they just don't feel themselves to be sufficient or enough, or this world beats it into them. Why? Well, lots of reasons. He feels bad. He's inauthentic. He's embarrassed. He's shameful. He grows older and more miserable instead of like Emerson. Emerson grows younger and younger by the year. Read his writing. He grows younger. Most men, unfortunately, they just grow older and meaner, and the world suffers. And a lot of these men are still projecting their voices forward through the ages. To this day, there's a lot of men in this world projecting their ugly voices into the world. Going on. From fear of his neighbor, but and even scarier when the masks come off, right? When the Philistines show you what real barbarians they really are. Turns out no one was being civilized or learning rationality all along. It's the same old thing, corralling animals, right? And good reason, for fear of his neighbor. And in America, we have sayings like good fences make good neighbors and fuck you money, right? That all exists because it was born in a cynical, hateful culture whose only solace and reprieve is escape from itself and the kind of vapid occupants of it. So fear of his neighbor who demands conformity and cloaks himself with it. But what is it that forces the individual to fear his neighbor? Life and death, sublimated into, hey, how you doing, Bob? Good morning, Susan. But what is it that forces the individual? Modesty, perhaps, in a few rare cases. For the majority, it is idleness, inertia. In short, that propensity for laziness for which the traveler spoke. Right, ascending and descending lines of life. He is right. Men are even lazier than they are fearful, and fear most of all the burdensome nuisance of absolutely honesty and nakedness. Right, and so here you have, in other words, Nietzsche saying, Honesty is man's nakedness. Shame is his honesty, right? That was his reaction to himself, to see he wasn't good enough, he wasn't big enough, he wasn't strong enough, he wasn't smart enough. All of nature has been a selection process for beauty and strength and intelligence, and the creation thereof in both people and our art. Because no one, I've said this before, no one cares about the production. They just care that there's some machine or slave there to do the job. That's not what anyone's celebrating. But what it is that forced the individual, modesty perhaps in a few rare cases, for the majority it is idleness, inertia, in short, the propensity for laziness of which the traveler spoke. He is right. Men are even lazier than they are fearful, and fear most of all burdensome nuisance of absolute honesty and nakedness. Artists alone hate this lax procession in borrowed manners and appropriated opinions, right? And this is why Plato banished them in the Republic, and appropriated opinions and reveal everyone's secret and bad conscience. The law that every man is a unique miracle. They dare to show us that man, he to himself is unique in each movement of his muscles. Even more that by being strictly consistent in uniqueness, he is beautiful, right? The one consistency is that a man be himself and not try to be someone or something else. It's really pretentious. I mean, it's one thing to understand being dead to the world and adjusting yourself as so. It's another thing to try to, again, force the projection that just doesn't match reality. It is beautiful and worth regarding as a work of nature and never boring. Right, the man in his uniqueness is a work of nature and not boring. It is a motion. When the great thinker despises human beings, he despises their laziness, for it is on account of their laziness that men seem like manufactured goods, unimportant and unworthy to be associated with or instructed. Right, and this is the example of, like Jung talks about this in personality types. You find a lot of teachers who are really bad because they put their own subject matter and their ideas over the students and how to get through to the students themselves. So countless men in history, countless fathers, they're just terrible teachers, or they're missing an action, or they're teaching an unreality to begin with. Um, so human beings who do not want to belong to the mass need only to stop being comfortable. As I've said, it's not just human all too human. It's not that man is alienated here. He's far too comfortable here. And I would say none of these are matters of notions of enlightenment or alienation or enlightened alienation or destitution. It's closer to a case of super transference, seeing what the bigger numbers are, what they can only ever mean, where that only ever goes, what that means for the individual who is left in relation thereto, right? That's something closer akin to modern enlightenment. Again, there exists no language for these terms, for these concepts, for these understanding. That we are products of an evolutionary process that is out of control under the illusion of control through the projection and use of real power, right? Why is everyone afraid? Why do people conform? Because they know who pays them, right? They know what's going to happen if they open their mouth. They know what's going to happen if they have to listen to one more stupid person, or like what is often common, like I've talked about, is it's natural and normal that personality types to this day still don't know or understand each other. Other people don't even know that personality type exists as an evolutionary phenomenon. But going on, stop being comfortable, follow their conscience, which cries out, be yourself. All that you are now doing, thinking, and desiring is not really yourself. So that's the real question. You know, under the transference of your belief in whatever larger projection that you and a group of people you know or don't know supposedly agree on when you don't, because none of you see the same thing, what is this monstrosity that everyone's looking at? If you actually, it's funny that Socratic philosophy stands as much as it ever did, in the sense that if you ever examine people's ideas and beliefs, you'll see that they quickly run out, and generally they quickly get angry, and generally they'll quickly want to kill you. Now, philosophy is institutionalized irony, the irony being the institution is exactly what turns mankind into cattle. Or again, the original tribal or natural institution was a mass of undifferentiated egos who were kept in check by various means amongst the tribe, superstitious and otherwise. The Western world wasn't able to escape this, but through the power of its science had the illusion of believing in its reality because it was backed by so much power. But when none of it ends in the happy ending that the people thought they were getting, right? This is where tempers start to flare. This is where all the old men never shut up and stop whining. You know, I put it like this: the old men have been whining for 25,000 years. These old men don't shut up, and they don't realize that they're the fossils. They're the one who are going by the wayside. They are the ones who are falling away, being selected or deselected for, regardless of their opinion. A lot of men don't realize their best use in the world is for a woman to use them to make kids. And the woman, the man isn't the woman's dream, but she settles for the vision in the child, right? Because we don't stop here. Man is a bridge, not a goal. Anyway, this has been a discussion on Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay Self-Reliance. Today I only discussed the first paragraph because it's such an important sentiment that you can see it called and re-echoed throughout the ages, from oldest history to this day, in our poets, in our artists, not even our rationalists, because the rationalists are lost in their own art, right? They just assume it's reality, and so it's taught, is basically kind of taught as, here's the big kid table, here's the little kid table. And man, if that held any weight for people being naive, then these old stupid men would have shut up 25,000 years ago and recognized their place. But you know, they just want to live forever, it seems, when the whole world and its idealism has been to get beyond an overman, right? And to go beyond the superfluity that has been life for eternity, which is meaningless labor, and that there's no sense to your suffering therein except what is self-created. So the artist's call through the ages has been to tap into these wilder and outer forces that become constrained only by invisible social forces and are misconstrued and misunderstood, like consciousness and personality type and subspecies of humanity to this day. And until then, you know, well, I'm going to say for a long time, I think there's certain medical barbarisms that are, but I'm digressing now. Um, Again, I'm Zach Morkowski. Thanks for joining me. More to come. I'll be following up with reading Ralph Waldo Emerson's Self-Reliance in full, as well as Nietzsche's The Greek State. I think I'll also be reading maybe an original essay or two to follow, and then just more work, because that's what it's always been. And it turns out there's no escape. So thanks again for your time, and I'll catch you on the next one, hopefully. Take care. Bye.